Good afternoon. This is Christy. I am the Youth Services Librarian for Scenic Regional Library, and today we're going to learn some weaving. So, weaving has been done in nearly every culture around the world throughout history. It's how people made cloth make clothes, make blankets, all the things that they needed. Well, we buy those things now, but weaving can still be a fun craft or hobby. So, we're going to learn how to do CD weaving. So we're going to use a CD as our loom. Weaving can be done anywhere from on a piece of cardboard to a small frame, homemade frame loom, to the large industrial sized looms that they use to make fabric. Um, but we're going to do a very simple one with a CD. So for you to get started, the first thing you'll need to do is go to your local branch of Scenic Regional Library and pick up your take and make kit. Your take and make kit will include a CD, a 6-foot piece of yarn, that's what we're going to use to make our warp, and a homemade yarn needle. So once you have that, the only other things you'll need is just a variety of yarn or cording or string or ribbon or a combination of all those things. So what you want to do to get started, find an end of your piece of yarn. Then we're going to take the CD. We want to do this with the shiny side out. So that's going to be the background for our weaving, the shiny side. So I'm going to put this yarn through the center of the CD. And then I want to take this and tie it to the back of the CD. So see, I'm tying it to itself at the back just to get a place to get started here. I do want to leave kind of a bit of a tail because I'm going to use that to tie something off later. So to make your warp, that's the strings that you're going to weave through, you're going to take the other end of your yarn and go around, back in to the hole, however many times for the amount of warp threads that you want. Um, Now, the really important thing about your warp threads, I'll continue to create my warp while I'm talking here. The important thing about your warp threads is that you're going to need an uneven amount of warp threads. That's very important. It has to be an uneven number of warp threads. You can do anything from 13 or 15 warp threads, or on mine, I did like, I think 31. So you can do a lot of warp threads and get a really tight weave, or if you do less warp threads, you'll get a looser weave. So far I have 5 here. And a really easy way to keep track of how many warp threads you have or to make sure it's uneven is to do it in sets. See, if you look closely, I have 2, 4, 6. I'm doing them in pairs. So that way, once I get it as full as I want, then I just do one more. And that way I know that it's an uneven number. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to go just until I have a small one we're going to practice with. So I'm going to go until I have 13 threads. You have enough yarn, that 6 feet should be enough yarn for you to do as many warp threads as you want, for you to make a nice tight one or do a loose one with 13 or 15 warp threads. Okay, so now I have 6 sets, so that's going to be 12 warp threads. I'm going to do 2 more to give me 14, and then I'll do that one last one to make my uneven number. Okay, then remember I said to keep that tail of yarn from where you tied on. I'm going to take that little tail of yarn, and that's what I'm going to tie to this piece that I have woven around just to secure my end. Okay, so here's the long piece I'm working with. I have tied it to that beginning thread that I started with, and then I am going to cut those off fairly short just so they're out of my way, and then I can either use this piece later as part of my weaving, or I can just toss it. So now what I want to do is spread these out evenly. So I want to spread my warp threads out so that they're about evenly spaced. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to do any measuring. They'll kind of even themselves out as you go, but I want them fairly evenly spaced. Okay. Next thing I want to do is take my needle. This needle was really simple to make. I just took a flat lid. This happens to be a Pringles lid, but you could do this with sour cream or a butter tub. You're going to want to cut the edge off because I want a nice flat circle of plastic. So this is just in case you lose or you need to make another. When I show a friend how to do it, make another. I shouldn't have got clear, huh? Then I'm just going to cut it kind of like a pizza where I'm cutting into long, thin triangles. It's going to be hard to see, but there we go. Okay, once I have a long, thin triangle, you're just going to cut the tip so it's not quite so sharp. Cut the end into, again, just curve it around. There's nothing important about that. And then punch a hole in yours. Here's the white one so you can see better. So I just cut a long, thin triangle, then curved the tip just a tiny bit, curved the end, and punched a hole right there. If you have a nice thin one, you'll be able to go further out to the edge with your weaving. If you make a thick one, as you can see, I wouldn't be able to go this far with my weaving because this is no longer going to fit. So if you want to get really close to the edge, you'll need a fairly thin needle. Okay, so I'm going to take my needle and tie a piece of yarn. I'm just going to go here in my scrap yarn bag. Now we have obviously didn't include all the yarn that you would need to do this. So a good place to find yarn if you don't have someone in your house who does knitting or crocheting or has a lot of yarn laying around, find someone who does, and they'll have a lot of scrap yarn, chances are. So you're just looking for scrap pieces. You don't need to go to the store and buy whole skeins of yarn. That's what the chunk of yarn when you buy it at the store is called. You just need scraps. So you're going to take an end of yarn, your first amount we're going to weave here. Yarn is kind of comes apart there at the end, so it might be kind of hard to get through that hole, but just keep working on it. Twist it until it gets kind of tight at the end, and then put it through that hole. We're going to tie a knot, a good tight knot. I found that when I was working on this the first time when I made this one, my knot kept coming undone, and I kept having to retie it. So a nice tight. Now, the length of the piece of yarn you want. Remember, the longer it is, the less often you'll have to tie off and start with a new piece. But, the less often you'll have to, but a really long piece you're constantly going to be pulling through. So you don't want to just take a whole big skein of yarn and tie off and try to work with that. You need to cut off a piece. So once you get the piece you want to start with, you're going to take the end that's not tied to the needle, put it through the center of your CD here with the warps on it. And I want to go to the back side, that's the printed side, and tie this to something. I can tie it just to any string in the warp, or I can just tie it to that beginning knots that I already have from creating the warp. So I'm just going to tie this in to a random string here, just tie it onto the back just to secure it so I don't pull it through when I'm pulling, because I want to kind of pull tight when I'm pulling the thread through as I weave. So here it is, tied to one of the strings on the back. Okay. I'm going to pull it up through the center, and what I want to do is I'm going to find that string it's tied to, follow it down up through the center, find where that is, and that's going to be my starting point. So I'm going to take my needle, start there, and go under a string, over the next string, under, let me turn so you can see here, under, over, under, over, under. This is where this homemade plastic needle is really good. If you were to buy a needle and use it, there are special needles called yarn needles that aren't so sharp and they're larger so you can fit yarn in it, but they're not going to give like this plastic needle does. It's really nice that I can kind of bend the needle and work with it. Okay, so I went over and under several warp threads, So then I just have to pull. Remember I said you don't want to make this too long because you'll deal with a lot of knots and be pulling forever. So I'm going to pull and pull it down tight there against the center. Okay, I'm going to figure out where I stopped. I was under this thread when I stopped, so I need to go over this one, under, over, under, over, under. I like to keep telling myself that as I go because it's very important. If you get off, so you're going over the same thread again, that's why it's uneven, because the first time around, you want to go over, under, over, under, over, under, but then all the ones I went over, I want to go under in the next round. That's what creates the weave. So it's very important that you don't skip one or go over two, under two. So I went under this one, so I know I need to go over this one, under, over, and you can do a lot, quite a few. Just go maybe all the way around once and then pull. And we're going to pull tight. So there, I have a second round. I'm going to figure out where I am. I'm under this one. So I need to go over, under, over, under, over, under. I can also kind of, as I go, I went under this one. So as I look down, I see that one wasn't over. So I know I'm right. I know I'm not off. I want to make sure I'm always going every other one. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Even if I'm not saying it out loud, when I do this, I'm usually sitting here in my head, going under, over, under, over, under, over, so that I know that I am doing it correctly. Oh, and here I'm already off. So, because I'm talking. So I'm going to pull that out, figure out where I got off at. This one's over, under, and stop right there. Okay, so once I have got another one going here so I can show you. Once I have as much as I want. This was a variegated yarn, meaning different colors. It kind of slowly switches from red to white to blue. So the one I was doing on the other was switching from a light green to a yellow to a darker green. So I'm going to finish off this piece of string here very quickly and show you how to change string. So one of the fun things about making it is you could use the same color or color variegate the whole way through. That would be fine. But a fun thing to do is kind of switch up the colors and the type of yarn that you're using. So I'm going to stop here and add a different yarn. I could just keep going till I go to the end. I'm just going to do a shortcut here and cut it off, but I could keep going. Just make sure you leave enough when you finish up with this piece of yarn to tie the next piece to it. Okay, I'm going to cut it long enough for me to add another piece, and I'm going to use ribbon. I think that would be fun, especially with this red, white, and blue, and I've got this red or blue polka dot ribbon. So I just want to tie it on, do a nice, strong, I'm doing a square knot. You want to do a knot that's not going to pull apart when you pull it this way, okay? Make sure to leave your ends, don't cut them super short, leave a little bit of an end so that you can work with it to weave it in after you're done. So I need to take that piece of yarn or piece of ribbon I'm using and tie it into a needle. So I have another needle here. You'd be cutting the yarn you're using, cutting that little bit left over off the needle or untying it and then tying your new piece. So now I'm tying my new piece of yarn here to the needle. Okay, nice, good, strong knot. Figure out where I stopped. Stopped here with an under. So I'm going to go under, over, under. Whoa, this one is getting stuck. There we go. Over, under, over, under, over, under. So the more warp strings that you have here, remember that's our strings going around the CD. The more warp strings you have, the longer this will take, but the tighter the weave will be. So let me at least get through here until we see what that ribbon's going to look like as it weaves through. So let's get a couple rows of ribbon going here. Under, over, under, over. Okay, ooh, I like how that looks. Over, under, over. It's nice to kind of push off the edge as I do this. So I go under, and as I get further out, the warp threads kind of push away from the CD, so it's easy to go down here and come off the edge and grab the needle. I'm going to pull that around. I really like how that ribbon looks. So this is a fun project to do with just a lot of different things. It could be like that rough jute or hemp string, any kind of string, um, thin rope. It could be all different kinds of yarn, the bumpy yarn or the kind of furry yarn. Um, the only thing I would say is when I did, so this is what it's looking like with the ribbon. I really like that ribbon in there. When I did mine, my sample one, I used this really super thin, fine, kind of furry, but fine thread, and that took a long time. So you could use even thread, but that's going to take forever. But that's how you would make regular fabric, is by weaving thread. So you can pick any kinds and mix and match. Like I said, I really like how this ribbon looks, but I also have some cording I could try. And then, like I said, all different sizes and colors of yarn. So once you finish, sorry, I dropped my CD. Once you finish your weaving, you get as far around as you want. You're just going to then weave it down underneath. So take your needle, here's my needle, go down through a couple of layers here and come back out and pull it down, and that'll just tie off the end. The ones in the back aren't really going to make a difference unless, say, you want something that's finished off. In that case, you could just find an old CD maybe and attach it to the back so you have a nice finished back. Some things you could do with this: tie a string in here and hang it up. Be a nice type of thing to hang in the window where the sunlight's going to reflect off the shiny part of the CD, almost like a dream catcher. Or it would be a great coaster, so something you could put on a table to put your drinks on, so you don't put water rings on your tables. So that is a CD weaving. I am going to put a link in the comments below, and you can use that link to find the website where I learned how to do this from the Make It a Wonderful Life blog. So I'll put the link to that blog in the comments below. And don't forget to stop by your local branch of Scenic Regional Library and pick up your Take and Make kit and make your own CD weaving. Bye.